My name is Ebony, and at 29 years old, I own a venture capital firm worth millions. But today, at my sister Bianca's wedding, my parents forced me to sit in the rain like a stray dog. They laughed when Bianca poured red wine on me and called me dirt. They mocked my husband for wearing work boots. What they did not know was that I secretly own this entire luxury estate, and my husband Darius is actually the billionaire owner of the company the groom works for. Before I tell you how my husband fired the groom in front of 300 guests, let me know where you are watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach your family a painful lesson about respect. The slate gray sky over the Hamptons looked ready to bruise. It matched the knot of dread tightening in my stomach as I walked up the gravel driveway of the Whispering Pines estate. The air was heavy with humidity, and the smell of expensive perfume mixed with the coming storm. I clutched my purse tighter. This was supposed to be the social event of the season. My younger sister Bianca was marrying Preston, the new CFO of a major construction conglomerate. My parents, Desmond and Patricia, had been talking about nothing else for 6 months. I reached the gilded iron gates where a security guard in a black suit held up a hand to stop me. "Name, please," he asked, looking me up and down. His eyes lingered on my dress. It was a simple black sheath from my own fashion line Onyx, but to the untrained eye, it looked plain compared to the sequins and silk parading past me. "Ebony Washington," I said, keeping my voice steady. He scanned his clipboard, frowning. "I am sorry, Mom, but you are not on the VIP list. General admission guests need to use the side entrance near the service road." I felt my face heat up. "I am the bride's sister," I insisted. "There must be a mistake." Before he could check again, I heard the sharp click of heels on pavement. My mother Patricia emerged from the white reception tent. She looked immaculate in a silver floor-length gown, her hair coiffed to perfection. She did not smile when she saw me. Instead, her lip curled in that familiar expression of disappointment she reserved exclusively for her eldest daughter. "You are late, Ebony," she hissed, grabbing my arm and pulling me away from the earshot of the other guests. "And look at you. You look like you are going to a funeral, not a wedding." I opened my mouth to explain that my flight had been delayed, but she cut me off with a wave of her manicured hand. "Save it. It does not matter anyway because there is no room for you in the main tent." I stared at her, unable to process the words. "What do you mean, no room? I am the maid of honor." Patricia laughed, a short, harsh sound. "Oh, honey, we gave that role to someone who actually fits the aesthetic. Bianca's college roommate is the maid of honor. You are just a guest. And barely that. Since you refused to contribute to the wedding fund, we had to give your seat at the family table to one of Preston's investors. We cannot afford to waste prime seating on failures." Failures. The word hung in the humid air. 5 years ago, I dropped out of medical school to start my own business. To them, that made me a dropout and a disgrace. They had no idea that my business Onyx Capital had just closed a deal worth $50 million. I opened my mouth to defend myself, to tell her the truth. But the look in her eyes stopped me. She did not want the truth. She wanted me to be small so Bianca could look big. "Go find a seat in the overflow section," she said, pointing toward the edge of the garden. "And stay out of the way. We do not want you ruining the photos." My mother's grip on my arm was like a steel claw as she marched me away from the white silk pavilions and the scent of fresh lilies. We walked past the rows of gold Chiavari chairs where the other guests were taking their seats. I saw cousins I had not spoken to in years. I saw neighbors from my childhood. They all looked away as we passed, pretending not to see Patricia dragging her grown daughter toward the periphery of the estate. We kept walking until the manicured lawn gave way to rougher grass near the catering trucks. There, sitting alone under a weeping willow tree, was a small, round metal table. It was rusted at the legs, and unlike every other table in the venue, it had no tablecloth, no floral centerpiece, and no chairs, just the table sitting forlornly in the dirt. "Here," Patricia said, releasing my arm with a shove. "You can sit here. I will have the staff bring you a folding chair." I looked from the rusted table to the glowing white tent 50 yards away. Mom, this is outside the venue. I cannot see the ceremony from here. I cannot even hear the vows. Patricia adjusted her diamond earrings, checking her reflection in her compact mirror. That is the point, Ebony. Preston comes from a very prominent family. His parents are uncomfortable with certain elements of our background. We promised them a flawless event. Having our unemployed daughter sitting front and center does not scream success. It screams charity case. I felt a lump form in my throat. Unemployed? Is that what you tell people? That I am unemployed? Patricia sighed, the sound of a martyr dealing with a difficult burden. Well, we cannot tell them you are a hustler, can we? It sounds so street. Just sit here and be quiet. If you are hungry, the servers will bring out the appetizers after the VIPs have been served. And Ebony. She stepped close, her perfume cloying and sweet. Do not dare try to sneak into the main tent. Security has been instructed to escort you out if you cause a scene. I do not want you embarrassing your sister. This is her day. Try not to make it about your failures for once. She turned on her heel and walked back toward the lights and the music, leaving me standing alone next to the catering dumpsters. The sky above rumbled low and threatening. A single drop of rain landed on my cheek. It felt cold, like a warning. I looked at the rusted table and then back at the tent where my family was gathering. They thought they were hiding their shame. They did not realize they were isolating the only person who could save them from the storm that was coming. I stood by the rusted table for 10 minutes, waiting for the folding chair that never came. The wind was picking up, whipping my hair across my face. Through the gaps in the hedge, I could see the bridal party lining up. Then I saw her. Bianca. My younger sister looked like a princess in a dress that I knew cost more than my parents' annual mortgage payments. It was a custom Vera Wang shimmering with thousands of tiny crystals. She was surrounded by 6 bridesmaids in blush pink, laughing and drinking champagne. When she spotted me lurking by the bushes, her smile vanished instantly. She said something to her bridesmaids and they all turned to look at me, snickering behind their hands. Bianca walked over, her movements graceful and predatory. Well, 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 she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Look who decided to show up. I thought Mom told you to stay in the back. I just wanted to see you, I said, forcing a smile. You look beautiful, Bianca. She did not return the compliment. Instead, her eyes raked over my black dress with undisguised contempt. Is that what you are wearing? It looks like something you picked up at a discount bin. Did you even try? Actually, this is an original onyx, I said quietly. It is a prototype from my upcoming fall collection. Bianca laughed, a sharp barking sound that made the bridesmaids giggle. Onyx. Is that what you call your little sewing hobby now? God, Ebony, it is so embarrassing. Preston's family is wearing Dior and Chanel, and you are wearing whatever this is. Please just stay out of the photos. I do not want people thinking we are related to the help. She stepped closer, invading my personal space. As she did, she deliberately placed her satin heel on the toe of my shoe, grinding it into the dirt. Oops, she said with zero remorse. Clumsy me. Maybe you should move back further. You are crowding the walkway. I pulled my foot back, biting my tongue. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that my sewing hobby had just been featured in Vogue. I wanted to tell her that the necklace she was wearing was a knockoff, while the simple studs in my ears were flawless diamonds I bought myself. But I said nothing. Not yet. I just looked at her, at the sister I used to carry on my back when we were kids, and realized there was nothing left of that little girl. There was only this cruel, shallow woman who measured worth in labels and validation. You better hurry, I said, my voice flat. It looks like it is going to rain. Bianca glanced at the sky and sneered. It would not dare rain on my wedding. God loves me too much for that, unlike some people. Now get back to your table. You are ruining my view. That was the moment my patience finally snapped. I had taken the insults about my career. I had taken the exclusion from the seating chart. But being told I was unloved by God because I was poor was too much. I stepped forward, my heels sinking into the soft turf. You know, Bianca, I said, my voice rising just enough to carry over the wind. You might be wearing a $10,000 dress, but it cannot hide how ugly you are acting right now. I paid for my own flight here. I cleared my schedule. I came to support you despite everything Mom and Dad have done to me. A little gratitude would not kill you." Bianca's face twisted in rage. She signaled to a passing waiter and grabbed a full glass of red wine from his tray. "Gratitude," she spat. "You want gratitude. You should be grateful we even let you on the property. You are a stain on this family, Ebony. You are nothing but a dropout who thinks she is better than us because she sells clothes out of a trunk. You want to talk about ugly? Look in the mirror." And with a flick of her wrist, she threw the contents of the glass at me. The dark red liquid splashed across my chest, soaking into the fabric of my dress and running down my legs. It felt cold and sticky. The bridesmaids gasped, but I could hear them laughing underneath the shock. "Now you look like what you are," Bianca sneered. "Dirt. You are just dirt, Ebony. And dirt belongs outside." As the last drop of wine hit the ground, a crack of thunder shook the ground beneath us. The sky opened up. It did not just start to rain, it poured. A torrential downpour that seemed to come from nowhere. Screams erupted from the garden. Guests scrambled for the cover of the main tent. Bianca shrieked, covering her hair and running toward the canopy surrounded by her bridesmaids. In seconds, the garden was empty. Everyone had found shelter. Everyone except me. I stood there frozen, the rain mixing with the wine on my dress. I was soaked to the bone in seconds. The water was freezing. I looked toward the tent. I could see the warm glow of the chandeliers inside. I could see waiters passing out towels to the guests who had gotten sprinkled on. But no one looked out at me. No one came to offer me an umbrella. I was alone in the storm, labeled as dirt and treated as less than human by my own flesh and blood. I shivered violently, hugging my arms around myself to preserve some warmth. The rain was relentless, blurring my vision. Through the downpour, I saw a figure emerge from the tent. It was my father, Desmond. For a split second, a foolish hope sparked in my chest. He was coming to get me. He was bringing an umbrella. He was going to apologize for Bianca and lead me into the warmth. He ran toward me holding a large black umbrella over his head, but as he got closer, I saw the expression on his face. It was not concern. It was fury. He stopped a few feet away, keeping himself dry while I stood in the deluge. "What did you say to her?" he shouted over the thunder. "Bianca is in there sobbing. Her makeup is ruined because you upset her. Dad?" "She threw wine on me," I shouted back, pointing at my stained dress. "Look at me. She called me dirt." Desmond did not even look at my dress. "I do not care what she did. It is her wedding day. You are the older sister. You are supposed to absorb it. You are supposed to make things easier, not harder. But you have always been selfish, haven't you? Always making everything about you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something. He threw it at me. It landed in a puddle at my feet. It was a gray, greasy rag used by the catering staff to wipe tables. "Clean yourself up," he ordered. "Do not let Preston's family see you looking like a drowned rat. It is embarrassing enough that you are here. Do not make it worse." He turned around and walked back to the white picket fence that separated the garden from the service area. He closed the gate, and I heard the distinct click of the latch locking. He turned back one last time. "Stay there until the reception starts. And if I hear one more peep out of you, I will have security throw you out onto the highway. Do you understand me?" He did not wait for an answer. He walked back into the tent, shaking his umbrella and disappearing into the warmth. I looked down at the dirty rag in the mud. I looked at the locked gate. The message was clear. I was not family. I was a problem to be contained. A mess to be hidden. I did not pick up the rag. I just stood there letting the rain wash over me, washing away the last remnants of the love I had held for my father. I dragged the rusted metal chair out from under the willow tree and sat down. The metal was cold against my legs, but I was already numb. As the rain beat down on me, my mind drifted back 5 years. I remembered the day I told them I was leaving Johns Hopkins. I remembered the look of horror on my mother's face, not because she was worried about my future, but because she could no longer brag to her bridge club about her daughter, the future surgeon. "You are throwing your life away," my father had screamed. "You will never amount to anything without a title." They did not listen when I tried to explain my vision. They did not care that I had found a gap in the market connecting minority-owned tech startups with ethical investors. To them, business was for people who weren't smart enough for medicine. So I left. I moved into a studio apartment the size of a closet. I ate instant noodles. I worked 18 hours a day. And I built Onyx Capital from a laptop on a cardboard box. They thought I was struggling because I never asked them for money. They thought I was poor because I drove a sensible car and wore clothes I made myself. They did not know about the penthouse in Manhattan. They did not know that last month Fortune magazine named me one of the most influential venture capitalists under 30. They did not know that the resort we were standing on, the Hamptons Hideaway, was part of a real estate portfolio I had acquired earlier this year. I had let them have this venue for free anonymously. I had told my management team to approve the application from the wedding of Bianca Washington as a gift, a silent peace offering. I wanted to see if they would treat me with kindness, if they thought I had nothing to offer. I had my answer. They treated me like a stray dog because they thought I had no bite. I pulled my phone out of my purse, shielding it from the rain with my body. I had one person left. One person who knew the truth. One person who loved me whether I was a doctor or a pauper. I dialed Darius's number, my wet fingers slipping on the screen. He answered on the first ring, his voice deep and steady, a sharp contrast to the chaos around me. "Baby, tell me you are inside. Tell me you are safe." I tried to speak, but a sob escaped instead. "It is bad, Darius," I choked out. "It is worse than we thought. Mom put me outside in the rain. Bianca threw wine on me and called me dirt. They locked the gate, Darius. They locked me out of the tent like an animal." There was a silence on the other end so heavy it felt like the air pressure dropped. "They did what?" His voice was low, a dangerous rumble that I rarely heard. Suddenly I heard a loud hiss in the background, followed by the sound of an engine sputtering and dying. "Damn it!" Darius cursed violently. "Baby, listen to me. The truck just overheated. The radiator is blown." I am pulling over to the shoulder. I felt a fresh wave of panic wash over me. "You are stuck. I am alone here." "No, you are not alone," he said firmly. "I am about 2 miles from the gate. I am running the rest of the way." Running. I looked at the torrential downpour. "Darius, you cannot run 2 miles in this storm. It is a monsoon out here." "I do not care if it is a hurricane," he said. "I am not leaving you there alone with those vultures. I will be there in 20 minutes. "Wait," I said, realizing the full implication of his plan. "Darius, you are coming straight from the site, aren't you? You are wearing your work clothes." "Yeah. I have got my steel toe boots on and the high-visibility vest." I did not have time to change after the concrete pour at the new children's hospital. My heart sank. My family already despised him because he drove his late father's old Ford pickup. They thought he was a simple laborer. If he showed up covered in mud, sweat, and concrete dust at a black tie wedding, they would tear him apart. Preston the groom was the new CFO of a construction firm. He was exactly the type of man who looked down on the people who actually built the buildings he managed. "Darius, please do not come like that," I begged. "They will humiliate you. They will treat you worse than they are treating me." "Let them try," Darius growled. "I do not care what they think about my boots or my truck. I care about you. I am coming, Ebony, and God help anyone who tries to stop me from getting to my wife." The line went dead. I stared at the dark screen of my phone. My husband, the man who quietly donated millions to charity, who owned the company that employed the groom, was running through a thunderstorm to save me. He was going to walk right into the lion's den. My parents would mock his poverty. Preston would likely try to have him arrested for trespassing. They would see a dirty construction worker. They would not see the man who signed their paychecks. I wiped the rain from my eyes and sat up straighter. Let them come, I thought. Let them show him exactly who they really are. Because once Darius sees how they treat us, there will be no mercy. The storm above was loud, but the storm coming up the driveway was going to be much, much worse. The rhythmic drumming of the rain was suddenly pierced by a sound that did not belong in the Hamptons. It was a guttural, mechanical roar, a coughing, sputtering growl that grew louder with every second. Heads inside the white tent began to turn. The string quartet faltered. I looked toward the main gate, my heart hammering against my ribs. Through the curtain of rain, a vehicle turned into the long gravel driveway. It was not a limousine. It was not a luxury SUV. It was a battered, rusted Ford F-150 pickup truck that looked like it had survived a war. The muffler was clearly broken because the engine noise was deafening, echoing off the manicured hedges and drowning out the polite murmurs of the guests. I watched as the truck rumbled closer, its tires crunching heavily on the gravel. Mud was splattered across the wheel wells, and the bed was filled with tools and tarps. To the 300 guests peering out from the dry safety of the tent, this truck was an eyesore, a blemish on their perfect day. But to me, it was a chariot. I knew that truck better than I knew my own car. It had belonged to Darius's father, a man who had spent his life pouring concrete foundations. When his father passed away, Darius had inherited the truck along with his work ethic. He kept it running not because he could not afford better, but because it reminded him of where he came from. He had a garage full of Ferraris and Bentleys back in the city, but he chose to drive this relic because it had a heart, just like him. The truck ground to a halt right in front of the main entrance, blocking the path of a sleek Rolls-Royce that had just pulled up. The engine gave one last defiant backfire that sounded like a gunshot before falling silent. The driver's door groaned as it was shoved open. A boot hit the pavement. It was a heavy work boot caked in gray mud and scuffed from years of use. Then came the rest of him. Darius stepped out into the rain, standing tall against the storm. He was not wearing a tuxedo. He was not even wearing a collared shirt. He was dressed in a pair of faded denim jeans that were stained with oil and dirt. His gray t-shirt clung to his chest, dark with sweat and covered in a fine layer of white cement dust. He wore a neon yellow safety vest that seemed to glow in the gloom. He looked exactly like what he was, a man who had just spent 12 hours on a construction site. A collective gasp went through the crowd. I could see my mother Patricia pressing a hand to her chest in horror. Bianca's mouth dropped open. Preston the groom stared with a look of pure revulsion, as if someone had just dumped a load of trash on his wedding cake. They saw a laborer. They saw a failure. They saw a man who did not belong in their world of silk and champagne. But as Darius slammed the truck door shut and locked eyes with me across the garden, I did not see any of that. I saw the only real man in a sea of counterfeits. He wiped the rain from his face, his jaw set in a line of grim determination, and started walking toward the locked gate. He did not look at the valet who was frantically waving at him to move the truck. He did not look at the security guards who were rushing forward. He only looked at me. And in that moment, the rusted truck and the dirty clothes did not matter. All that mattered was that he was here. The storm had arrived. Preston strode out from the dry sanctuary of the white tent, flanked by my parents like a king holding court. He held a crystal flute of champagne in one hand, and with the other he made a theatrical show of pinching his nose shut. His face was twisted in a sneer of absolute disgust as he looked down from the raised marble steps at my husband standing in the rain. "Excuse me," Preston called out, his voice dripping with condescension. "Did someone order a septic tank repair? Deliveries and maintenance are around the back, buddy. You are ruining the aesthetic out here." "My mother," Patricia gasped, pressing a silk handkerchief to her mouth as if the mere sight of Darius might infect her. "Oh God, Desmond," she whispered loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look at him. He is covered in filth. Get him out of here before he touches anything." Darius did not flinch. He did not look at his muddy boots or his stained shirt. He did not look at the security guards moving to intercept him. He looked straight at Preston with a gaze so intense it should have cracked the groom's composure. He stopped at the locked gate, his hands gripping the wet iron bars. "I am not the plumber," Darius said. His voice was calm, deep, and carried a weight that cut through the sound of the falling rain. "And I am not a delivery boy. I am Ebony's husband, and I am here to get my wife." For a second there was silence, the kind of silence that happens right before a bomb goes off. And then the laughter started. It began with Bianca, a high, shrill cackle that pierced the air. Then Preston joined in, shaking his head in disbelief. Finally, my parents and the guests inside the tent erupted into a chorus of mockery. It was a wave of sound that crashed over us, cruel and relentless. "You have got to be kidding me," Preston choked out, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. "This is your husband, Ebony. This ditch digger. I knew you married down, but this is pathetic. He looks like he just crawled out of a sewer." "My father." Desmond shook his head, his face red with second-hand embarrassment. "I told you not to bring him, Ebony. I told you he would not fit in. But you never listen. You just had to drag this embarrassment to your sister's special day." The laughter grew louder, feeding on itself. They were not just laughing at Darius. They were laughing at me. At my choices. At the life they thought I led. They saw a man in dirty clothes and assumed he was worthless. They saw a blue-collar worker and assumed he was beneath them. They had no idea that the man they were mocking could buy and sell every single person in that tent 10 times over. I looked at Darius expecting to see anger or shame, but I saw neither. He stood there like a statue, unmoving and unbroken by their scorn. He waited for the laughter to die down, his eyes locked on Preston, and in that look I saw the promise of a reckoning that would silence them all forever. Preston swirled the golden liquid in his glass, his eyes gleaming with a malicious amusement that made my skin crawl. He leaned casually against the wet iron gate, looking at Darius through the bars, like he was observing an animal in a zoo. "You know, I am actually surprised," Preston drawled, his voice smooth and loud enough for everyone to hear. "I always thought you guys were supposed to be, what is the word, athletically gifted, or musically inclined. You know, basketball stars, rappers." He chuckled, a low sound that vibrated with centuries of ugly history. "But here you are playing in the mud like a common laborer. Did the mixtape not drop? Or did you just not have the vertical leap for the NBA?" It was a microaggression so sharp it could cut glass, wrapped in the veneer of a joke, but dripping with racism. He was reducing my husband, a brilliant self-made billionaire, to a stereotype because of the color of his skin and the dirt on his clothes. I waited for my parents to step in. I waited for Desmond, who had marched in civil rights protests in his youth, to shut this man down. I waited for Patricia, who always bragged about our heritage, to defend her son-in-law. But they did nothing. Worse than nothing, they joined in. My father shook his head, his face twisted in a grimace of pure shame, not for Preston's bigotry, but for Darius's presence. "I told you," Ebony, Desmond shouted over the rain, avoiding Darius's eyes completely. "I told you that you needed to marry someone with ambition, someone who fits in. Instead, you bring this spectacle to our doorstep. We are trying to elevate this family, and you keep dragging us back down to the gutter." My mother, Patricia, looked at Preston with an apologetic smile, desperate to distance herself from us. "Oh, Preston, please forgive us," she pleaded. "We had no idea he would show up looking like a vagrant. We raised Ebony better than this. She just has a taste for the lowlife, I suppose. It is not our fault." I felt a scream building in my throat. My parents were so desperate to be accepted by this white, wealthy family that they were willing to swallow their own dignity and feed us to the wolves. They looked at Preston and saw a savior, a ticket to the upper echelon of society. They looked at Darius and saw only a reminder of the struggle they thought they had escaped. They did not see the man who treated their daughter like a queen. They did not see the man who worked 18-hour days to build an empire. All they saw was the dirt on his jeans and the color of his skin, and to them that meant he was nothing. Darius finally moved. He did not lunge at Preston. He did not scream at my parents. He simply shifted his weight, his boots squelching in the mud, and tilted his head slightly, watching Preston with the cold calculation of a predator assessing its prey. "You think manual labor is funny?" Darius asked, his voice low and even. "You think building things is beneath you?" Preston laughed again, a nervous sound this time. "I think people should know their place," he sneered. "And your place is at the service entrance. Now run along before I have security remove you for loitering." My mother nodded vigorously. "Yes, go away, Darius. You are ruining everything. Just leave us alone." Suddenly, the chaos inside the tent spilled over. A frantic wedding planner with a headset rushed up to my mother, whispering furiously and pointing at the muddy tracks on the white dance floor. The storm had flooded the service road, and half the catering staff was stuck in a van a mile away. Tables were piling up with dirty champagne flutes, and the guests were getting restless waiting for the hors d'oeuvres. My mother Patricia looked around in panic. Her eyes landed on us. A spark of opportunistic cruelty lit up her face. She walked over to the gate and unlocked it, but she did not open it wide enough to welcome us in. She stood there blocking the path like a sentry. "Well, do not just stand there gawking," she snapped at me. "We are short-staffed. The runners cannot get through the mud. Since you two are already wet and filthy, you might as well make yourselves useful. Come inside and start clearing the tables. If you do a good job, I will ask the chef to save you some of the leftover shrimp cocktail before we throw it out." The insult was so casual, so breathtakingly arrogant, that it took a moment to register. She was asking her daughter and her son-in-law to work as busboys at her other daughter's wedding. She was offering us trash as payment. I saw the muscles in Darius's jaw tighten. His hands balled into fists at his sides. The veins in his neck bulged against the collar of his t-shirt. He took a step forward, his ample frame towering over my mother. His eyes were dark, with a fury that promised violence not physical, but financial. He was ready to end this right now. He was ready to pull out his phone and buy the venue just to kick her out. "No one talks to my wife like that." He began, his voice a low rumble of thunder that rivaled the storm outside. "You think because I have dirt on my hands, I am your servant. I am going to show you exactly who." I reached out and grabbed his hand, squeezing it hard. His skin was rough and warm against my cold, wet palm. "Wait," I whispered. My voice was trembling, but my eyes were dry. "Not yet, Darius. Please." He looked down at me, confusion warring with his anger. "Ebony, they are treating us like animals. Why would you want to help them?" "Because I want to see," I said softly, staring at my mother, who was tapping her foot impatiently. "I want to see how far they will go. I want to see if there is any bottom to this well. If we stop them now, they will just say we were uncooperative. They will play the victim. But if we do this, if we serve them while they mock us, there will be no coming back from it. Let them dig their own grave, Darius. Please, just for an hour." Darius looked at my mother, then back at me. He saw the cold resolve in my eyes. He took a deep breath, exhaling slowly through his nose. "Okay, baby," he said, his voice tight. "We do it your way. But the second this is over, I am burning this whole kingdom to the ground." "Fine," my mother barked, oblivious to the dangerous current running between us. "Grab a tray from the cart. And try not to drip mud on the guests. You are here to work, not to socialize. Remember your place." She turned and marched back into the party, leaving the gate open just enough for the help to squeeze through. We stepped into the light, not as guests, but as ghosts, haunting the feast of people who wished we did not exist. The humiliation was immediate and visceral. Darius and I moved through the crowded reception tent, balancing trays piled high with half-eaten shrimp cocktails and dirty napkins. The guests deliberately avoided eye contact, treating us like invisible fixtures of the venue. I saw a former classmate from high school drop her napkin on the floor right in front of me, and then wait expectantly for me to pick it up. I bent down, my face burning, and retrieved it. "Thank you," she murmured without looking at me, already turning back to her conversation about summer homes in Italy. Darius was faring no better. I watched him across the room, his broad shoulders hunched slightly as he navigated the tight spaces between tables. He was carrying a heavy bus tub filled with empty champagne bottles, his muscles straining under the neon vest. Preston the groom bumped into him, spilling a drop of wine on his own tuxedo. "Watch where you are going, you clumsy oaf," Preston snapped. "That tux cost more than your truck." Darius did not apologize. He simply stared at Preston until the groom muttered something under his breath and hurried away. We met near the service station, dumping the waste into large bins. The smell of stale alcohol and discarded food was overwhelming. Darius wiped sweat from his forehead, leaving a streak of dirt on his brow. "You know, baby," he whispered, leaning close so only I could hear. "This reminds me of the negotiations for the merger with Apex Global. The board members treated me like an outsider too. They thought because I did not go to Harvard, I was easy prey." I nodded, stacking dirty plates with mechanical precision. "And what did you do?" I asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it. "I let them talk," Darius said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I let them underestimate me. I let them think they had won. And then when the contracts were on the table, I bought 51% of their stock before lunch. They did not even know they were working for me until the ink was dry." I looked at him, really looked at him. Under the dirt and the exhaustion, I saw the brilliant mind that had outmaneuvered Wall Street tycoons. I saw the patience of a man who built skyscrapers from the ground up, knowing that a strong foundation takes time. "Are we close to 51% yet?" I whispered back, gesturing to the room full of people who mocked us. Darius glanced at Preston, who was currently standing on a chair raising a toast to his own brilliance. "We are at 99%, he said, his eyes gleaming, just waiting for the signature. A waiter rushed past us, his arms full of clean silverware. "Hey, you two," he hissed. "Stop chatting and get back out there. The mother of the bride is complaining that table 4 is a disaster. Move it." We grabbed our trays and headed back into the fray. As I walked past my parents' table, I heard my father Desmond laughing loudly at a joke Preston had made. He did not even notice his eldest daughter clearing the empty glasses from under his nose. He was too busy celebrating his proximity to power, never realizing that the real power was serving him as water. "Ladies and gentlemen," Preston bellowed into the microphone, his voice booming across the tent, "if I could have your attention, please." The chatter died down. All eyes turned to the stage where Preston stood, chest puffed out, swirling his champagne. He looked every inch the corporate shark he aspired to be. "Today is not just about love," he continued, flashing a charming smile at Bianca. "It is about the future. And speaking of the future, I have some big news." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the anticipation build in the room. "As of this morning, I have officially been named the new Chief Financial Officer of Apex Global." Applause erupted like a sudden storm. My parents clapped the loudest, their faces glowing with greed. Apex Global was the biggest construction conglomerate in the state. Being CFO meant power, prestige, and millions in stock options. Preston soaked it up, raising a hand to quiet the room. Thank you. It is a huge responsibility. Apex has been, let us just say, a bit soft lately. The previous leadership was too focused on diversity initiatives and community outreach." He made air quotes with his fingers, his tone dripping with disdain. "But that ends now. My first act as CFO will be to trim the fat. We need to get back to basics: efficiency, profit. And if that means cutting loose some of the less culturally fit elements of our workforce, then so be it." A few guests shifted uncomfortably, but most nodded along, either missing the dog whistle or simply not caring. I froze, a dirty plate in my hand. He was talking about firing minority workers. He was talking about gutting the very programs Darius had built to help underprivileged communities. He was bragging about destroying livelihoods to boost a stock price. "We spend too much money pampering laborers who should just be grateful to have a job." Preston went on, his voice rising with conviction. I plan to automate 50% of our on-site logistics and outsource the rest. We are going to clean house, no more handouts, no more charity cases clogging up the payroll. I looked at Darius. He was standing near the bar holding a pitcher of water. His face was unreadable, a mask of stone. But I saw his knuckles white against the glass handle. He was listening to this man, his new employee, vow to dismantle his life's work. Preston did not know that the soft leadership he was mocking was Darius. He did not know that the man he called a ditch digger 10 minutes ago was the one who signed off on executive promotions. Or rather, the one who would have signed off. To Apex Global, Preston shouted, raising his glass high. And to a leaner, whiter, brighter future. He laughed at his own slip of the tongue, a sound that grated on my nerves like sandpaper. The crowd laughed with him, a sycophantic chorus fueling his ego. My father leaned over to my mother and whispered loudly, "Finally, a son-in-law with real vision." I felt sick. They were cheering for cruelty. They were toasting to bigotry. And standing in the shadows, the architect of their destruction was watching every move, counting every insult, and preparing to bring the entire house of cards crashing down. I watched as Darius moved toward the head table with the pitcher of ice water in his hand, looking like a toy against his massive forearm. He approached Preston, who was currently holding court with a group of sycophantic investors. Preston did not even look up as Darius began to fill his empty glass. He just kept talking about profit margins and cutting overhead. Darius paused, the water stream steady and clear. "Excuse me, sir." Darius said, his voice rough like gravel. I could hear the forced deference in it, a tone he had not used since he was a teenager working summer jobs. "I heard something about Apex Global. Is it true the chairman started as a laborer? I heard he really values the guys on the ground." Preston stopped mid-sentence. He turned slowly, looking at Darius with a mixture of amusement and irritation. He clearly could not believe the help was speaking to him. "You heard that, did you?" Preston chuckled, taking a sip of the water Darius had just poured. "Well, let me tell you something about rumors, my friend. They are usually started by people who wish they were in charge. Yes, the chairman has a cute little backstory about pulling himself up by his bootstraps. It plays well with the PR department, but between you and me, he is history." Darius's face remained impassive, but I saw his eyes narrow slightly. "History," Darius repeated. "I thought he built the company." Preston waved a hand dismissively as if swatting away a fly. "He built the foundation, sure. But he is a dinosaur, an old senile man who is too afraid to make the hard choices. He is a figurehead, a mascot. He sits in his office and lets the real sharks run the water. And now that I am CFO, I am the shark. I am the one who holds the real power." I held my breath. Preston was digging his own grave with a shovel made of pure ego. He was calling a 32-year-old man an old dinosaur. He was calling the most ruthless negotiator in the industry a senile figurehead. He had absolutely no idea who was standing right in front of him. Darius leaned in slightly, just an inch. "So you are saying the chairman is on his way out?" Preston grinned, showing teeth that had cost thousands of dollars to straighten. "Oh, he is not just on his way out. I am going to kick him to the curb personally. First board meeting next week, I am presenting a vote of no confidence. He is too soft, too focused on community centers and scholarships. We need a killer at the helm, and once I get rid of him, Apex is going to skyrocket." Darius nodded slowly, absorbing the information. He set the pitcher down on the table with a heavy thud. "Interesting," he said, his voice losing its servile edge. "Very interesting. Good luck with that vote, Preston. I have a feeling it is going to be a memorable meeting." Preston laughed completely, missing the threat in Darius's tone. "Thanks, buddy. Now fetch me some more ice. This is melting." Darius turned away, and as he walked past me, I saw a ghost of a smile on his lips. It was terrifying. He had just confirmed that his new executive was plotting a coup, and he had confirmed that Preston was not just bigoted, but disloyal. The trap was set, and Preston had walked right into it with his eyes wide open. I was clearing the dessert plates from table 5 when I saw Bianca gliding toward us like a shark scenting blood. She had changed into her second dress of the evening, a silk slip dress that left little to the imagination. In her hand, she held a small porcelain bowl of lobster bisque, steaming hot and vibrant orange. She was not looking at me, though. Her eyes were fixed on Darius, who was kneeling on the floor wiping up a champagne spill caused by a careless guest. He was vulnerable down there, a target. Bianca did not stumble. She did not trip over her hem. She simply walked up behind him, tilted her wrist, and poured the thick hot soup directly onto his left boot. The liquid splashed over the leather, soaking into the laces and splattering onto his jeans. Darius hissed in pain as the heat penetrated the heavy material, but he did not shout. He slowly stood up, wiping the bisque from his pant leg, his face a mask of controlled fury. "Oh my God, I am so clumsy!" Bianca exclaimed, her hand flying to her mouth in a performance that would not fool a toddler. "I am so sorry, Darius. I did not see you down there on the floor. I guess I am just not used to looking down that low." She giggled, looking around at her bridesmaids for approval. They tittered like nervous birds enjoying the sport. Then Bianca's eyes dropped to his boots again, and her expression shifted from fake apology to open mockery. "But hey, those are work boots, right?" she said, her voice loud and carrying. "Safety boots. Aren't they supposed to be waterproof and heat-resistant? I mean, I assume they are designed to handle mud and sludge and whatever else you people step in all day, so a little lobster bisque should not hurt them, unless of course they are just cheap knockoffs. Are they from Walmart, Darius? Did you pick them up on the clearance rack because you could not afford the real thing?" The insult was so petty, so small, and yet it struck a nerve deep inside me. Those boots were not cheap. They were custom-made Red Wing boots, the kind that cost $400 and last a lifetime. They were the boots his father had bought him when he landed his first big contract 10 years ago. They were a symbol of everything he had built, everything he stood for, and Bianca was treating them like garbage. Darius looked at the soup staining the leather. He looked at Bianca, smirk. He took a napkin from his back pocket and calmly wiped the worst of the mess away. "It is fine, Bianca," he said, his voice flat. "Leather cleans up. Some stains, however, are permanent, like character." Bianca's smile faltered for a second, her eyes narrowing. "What is that supposed to mean?" she snapped. "Are you calling me stained? I am the bride. I am the star of this show. You are just here because my sister could not find a real man, a man who wears a tuxedo, not a construction vest. Honestly, Ebony, I do not know how you stand the smell. He smells like sweat and wet dog." She wrinkled her nose, waving her hand in front of her face, as if warding off a bad smell. "It is nauseating. You really should take him outside and hose him down before he ruins the appetite of the paying guests." "Oops, I forgot. You guys are not paying guests, are you? You are working for your supper, so maybe you should get back to scrubbing the floor where you belong." I felt my hands shaking so hard the silverware on my tray rattled. I wanted to grab the nearest wine bottle and smash it on the table. I wanted to scream at her until my voice gave out. But Darius caught my eye across the table. He gave a microscopic shake of his head. Not yet. He was still playing the long game. He was letting her pile the insults higher and higher, building a tower of disrespect that would eventually collapse and crush her. But looking at the soup on his boots, I knew we were reaching the breaking point. The storm outside was nothing compared to the pressure building inside this tent. The speeches dragged on, but the worst was yet to come. My father Desmond took the microphone back from Preston. He looked out at the crowd, his face flushed with champagne and pride. Beside him, my mother Patricia beamed, clutching Bianca's hand like it was a lifeline. "You know, friends," Desmond boomed, "raising children is hard. Sometimes you plant two seeds in the same garden, and one grows into a rose while the other becomes a weed." The crowd chuckled nervously. I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. He was talking about me, right in front of my face. "But today we celebrate the rose," my mother chimed in, leaning into the mic. "Bianca has always been our joy, our pride. And honestly, in our hearts, she is our only true daughter." The air left my lungs. They had just publicly disowned me. But they were not done. Desmond pulled a velvet folder from his jacket pocket. Because she is the only one carrying this family's legacy forward, we have made a decision. Tonight we are signing over the deed to the family estate and transferring the entirety of our savings to Bianca and Preston. We want to ensure Patricia added her eyes flicking briefly to where I stood holding a tray of dirty dishes that our daughter never has to struggle. We do not want her to end up living a miserable hand-to-mouth existence like some people who think they know better than their parents. Bianca squealed with delight, throwing her arms around them. The guests applauded, a thunderous sound that felt like it was crushing my bones. They were cheering for my erasure. They were clapping for my financial ruin. They were giving away the house I grew up in, the house I had secretly saved from foreclosure 2 years ago without telling them. They were gifting assets they did not even realize they had already lost. I looked at the tray in my hands, the dirty napkins, the half-eaten cake. I looked at my parents smiling down at their golden child, and suddenly the hurt vanished. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. They had fired the last shot. They had severed the last tie. There was no reason to hold back anymore. No reason to protect them from the truth. No reason to be the dutiful daughter waiting for scraps of affection that would never come. I set the tray down on the nearest table with a deliberate clatter. The sound was small, but to me it sounded like a gavel falling. I straightened my spine, wiping my hands on my dress. I turned to Darius. He was watching me, his eyes dark and waiting. He saw the shift in me. He saw the moment the daughter died and the CEO took over. I walked over to him, my heels sinking slightly into the mud, but my steps steady. I reached up and brushed a speck of dirt from his cheek. His muscles were coiled tight, ready to spring. I looked him dead in the eye and spoke the words that would end their world. "It is time, baby. Burn it down." My mother, Patricia, was crying tears of joy as she pulled a small, ornate box from her clutch. Inside, nestled on black velvet, was a heavy iron key. It was old, rusted in places, but to everyone in our family, it was iconic. It was the key to the sprawling colonial house in Oak Bluffs where I had grown up. The house that had been in our family for 3 generations. This house, Patricia sobbed into the microphone, is more than just wood and stone. It is our history. It is where your father and I built our lives, and now, it is where you and Preston will build yours. We want you to raise our grandchildren there, surrounded by love and legacy. It is the greatest gift we can give you." Bianca gasped, covering her mouth with her hands. "Oh my God," she shrieked. "The house! You are giving us the house! This is amazing!" Preston grinned like a Cheshire cat, already calculating the property value in his head. He leaned in and kissed my mother on the cheek. "Thank you, Patricia." "Desmond, this is incredibly generous. We will take good care of it. I promise." The crowd erupted again. People were standing up, clapping, whistling. It was the perfect moment. The passing of the torch. The ultimate act of parental love. And it was a lie. A complete fabrication. I watched them celebrating their grand gesture, and I felt a cold calm settle over me. I knew something they did not. I knew the secret they had been hiding for 2 years. I knew why my father had been so desperate to marry Bianca off to a wealthy man. They were broke. They had leveraged everything they owned to maintain their lifestyle, and the house was the first casualty. But they had not told Bianca that. They were gifting her a ticking time bomb. I walked toward the stage, my movements deliberate. I did not rush. I did not shout. I just walked up the stairs, my heels clicking on the wooden planks. The sound cut through the applause like a knife. People started to notice me. The clapping faltered, then died out. Bianca turned, her smile freezing when she saw me standing there in my stained dress. "What do you think you are doing?" she hissed. "Get off the stage, Ebony. You have ruined enough." I ignored her. I walked straight to the microphone stand where my father was still beaming. I reached out and took the mic from his hand. He was so surprised he did not even resist. I tapped it once to make sure it was on. The feedback squeal made everyone wince. "Wait a minute," I said, my voice amplified and echoing across the silent garden. "Before you pop the champagne, there is something everyone needs to know." I looked at my parents. Their faces were masks of confusion and fear. I looked at the key in the velvet box. "That is a beautiful gesture, Mom, Dad. Truly touching. But there is just one small problem. You cannot give away something you do not own." The silence was absolute. You could hear the rain dripping off the tent canvas. My father stepped forward, his face turning purple. "What are you talking about, Ebony? Get down from there. You are drunk." "I am not drunk, Dad," I said calmly. "I am just informed. You see, everyone here thinks you are gifting Bianca a family legacy. But the truth is, you lost that house 2 years ago. You mortgaged it to the hilt to pay off your gambling debts, Dad. And when you defaulted, the bank foreclosed." Gasps rippled through the crowd. My mother looked like she was going to faint. "That is a lie," she screamed. "It is a lie." "Is it?" I asked, pulling a folded document from the pocket of my dress. I held it up. "This is the foreclosure notice from First National Bank, dated 24 months ago. It lists the property at 112 Oak Bluffs Avenue as seized assets. You have been renting it back from the bank ever since, pretending you still owned it. Pretending you were still the lords of the manor. But the lease is up next month, and you have nowhere to go. That is why you are giving it to Bianca. You are hoping Preston will pay the rent." Preston looked at my father, his eyes wide with betrayal. "Is this true, Desmond? Did you try to pawn off a foreclosed house on me?" My father stammered, unable to form a coherent sentence. "It was a temporary setback," he mumbled. "We were going to buy it back, with what I asked. Your credit is ruined. You have no assets. You are destitute, and you just tried to trick your favorite daughter into taking on your debt. Happy wedding day, Bianca. Welcome to the real legacy of this family, lies and bankruptcy." My father Desmond let out a boisterous laugh that sounded forced and brittle. He looked out at the confused crowd and spread his arms wide, trying to regain control of the narrative. "You have to forgive my daughter, everyone." He boomed, his voice shaking slightly. "She has always had a vivid imagination. And clearly she is so jealous of her sister's success that she has resorted to fabricating legal documents. This is slander, Ebony. Pure slander." My mother Patricia chimed in, her face a mask of haughty disdain. "It is sad, really. She cannot stand that Bianca is getting the fairy tale ending she never had. Darling, put that fake paper away before you embarrass yourself any further. You are making a fool of yourself." I watched them deny reality, standing there in their expensive clothes that were likely bought on credit. They truly believed they could talk their way out of this. They thought their social standing and their arrogance were shields that could deflect the truth. But I had come prepared. I knew they would call me a liar. I knew they would try to gaslight me in front of 300 people. That was why I had not just brought a piece of paper. I walked over to the audio-visual cart at the side of the stage where the laptop controlling the wedding slideshow sat. The tech guy tried to block me, but one look from Darius, who had moved to the bottom of the stairs, made him step aside. I pulled the HDMI cable from the laptop and plugged it into my phone. The giant LED screen behind the stage flickered. The looping video of Bianca and Preston frolicking on a beach disappeared. In its place, a high-resolution PDF appeared, projected 10 feet tall for everyone to see. Gasps rippled through the audience. It was not a forgery. It was a bank statement from First National Bank, scanned and enlarged. The header was unmistakable. The account names were Desmond and Patricia Washington, and the numbers were in bold red ink. I tapped my phone screen, zooming in on the transaction history. "Let us look at the details, shall we?" I said, my voice cutting through the stunned silence. "Here we see the initial second mortgage taken out 2 years ago. $400,000. A lot of money. You told everyone you were investing in a new business venture. But if we look at the transfer records right here, we see where that money actually went." The screen shifted to show wire transfers. MGM Grand, Caesar's Palace, the Borgata. Dozens of transactions totaling nearly $500,000. You did not invest in a business, Dad, I said, looking at him. You gambled it away. You spent your children's inheritance at the blackjack tables in Atlantic City and Las Vegas. And when the money ran out, you stopped paying the mortgage. I swiped to the next document. A foreclosure notice dated 30 days ago. Final judgment. Eviction scheduled for next week. The bank has already seized the title, Mom. You do not own the house. You do not own the furniture inside it. You do not even own the clothes on your back because you put them on credit cards you have defaulted on. You are standing here playing the role of benevolent benefactors gifting a legacy to your golden child, but the only thing you are giving Bianca is a trespassing charge if she tries to move in. My mother made a sound like a wounded animal. She looked at the screen, then at the horrified faces of her friends, and finally at Preston's parents, who looked ready to call the police. The facade was gone. The ugly truth was projected in high definition, looming over them like a tombstone. They were not wealthy socialites. They were destitute addicts who had lied to everyone they knew. And I was the only one with the receipt. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the kind of silence that happens when a bomb goes off, but the sound has not caught up to the shockwave yet. 300 people stared at the screen, then at my parents, and finally at me. My father was the first to break it. He started to laugh, a frantic, unhinged sound. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "Even if the bank took the house, it is just a temporary setback. Some faceless corporation owns it now. We can negotiate with them. We can work out a deal. We have connections." I shook my head slowly, pity mixing with my anger. "You really do not get it, do you, Dad? You think you can just charm your way out of this. But banks do not care about charm, they care about assets. And when your loan went into default when the property went to auction last month, there was only one bidder, one entity willing to take on your toxic debt." I tapped my phone one last time. The screen changed again. This time it showed a deed transfer document. The date was recent, just 2 weeks ago. The seller was First National Bank, and the buyer was highlighted in neon yellow, Onyx Capital Holdings. A murmur ran through the crowd. Some of the guests, the ones in finance or tech, recognized the name. They whispered to their neighbors, pointing at me. Onyx Capital. Preston muttered, his face pale. "That is the venture capital firm that has been disrupting the market. They are huge. Why would they buy a foreclosed house in Oak Bluffs? Because the CEO wanted to save her childhood home?" I said, my voice ringing clear across the garden. I looked at my mother. "You called me a failure, Mom. You called me a dropout. You told everyone I was unemployed. But you never asked what I was doing with my time. You never asked about the late nights or the business trips. You just assumed that because I did not follow your path, I was lost. Well, I was not lost. I was building. I founded Onyx Capital 5 years ago with nothing but a laptop and a dream. And today, that company is worth $300 million. And one of its assets is the house you are currently living in." My mother's knees gave out. She grabbed onto the podium for support, her face a mask of pure horror. "You," she whispered, "you own the house." "Yes," I said. "I bought the debt. I paid off the arrears. I stopped the eviction. Not because you deserved it, but because I could not bear to see the place I grew up in sold to strangers. I saved you from homelessness, Mom. The daughter you called dirt. The daughter you forced to sit in the rain. I am the only reason you still have a roof over your head." Preston looked from the screen to me, his eyes wide with a dawning realization. "Wait," he said, his voice trembling. "If you are the CEO of Onyx Capital, then that means—" He did not finish the sentence. He did not have to. The realization was spreading through the crowd like wildfire. The woman they had mocked, the woman they had treated like a servant, was the most powerful person in the room. And she was holding the deed to their destruction. The air was thick with tension, a physical weight pressing down on everyone. And in that silence, the sound of the rain seemed to stop, replaced by the thunderous beating of hearts, realizing they had bet on the wrong horse. Preston's face turned a shade of crimson that rivaled the wine stains on my dress. The humiliation was too much for his fragile ego to handle. He had just been exposed as a fool who was marrying into a bankrupt family, and worse, he had been outsmarted by the woman he had spent the last 3 hours mocking. He lunged across the stage, his polished shoes slipping on the wet wood. "You lying witch!" he screamed, his voice cracking. "This is fake. It is all fake. You forged these documents. Security, get her out of here. Throw this trash out on the street where she belongs." He reached for the microphone, trying to wrestle it from my hand. I stepped back, but he was faster. His hand clamped around my wrist, twisting it painfully. "You are going to pay for this," he hissed, spit flying from his mouth. "I will sue you for everything you have got. I will ruin you." Suddenly a shadow fell over us. A large, imposing shadow that blocked out the lights from the tent. Darius had moved. He did not run. He did not shout. He simply appeared on the stage, moving with a speed that belied his size. He reached out and grabbed Preston's wrist, the one holding mine. His grip was like a vice. "Let go of my wife," Darius said. His voice was not loud. It was a low rumble, a vibration that you felt in your chest rather than heard with your ears. It was the sound of a tectonic plate shifting. Preston tried to pull away, but he was trapped. He looked up at Darius, his eyes wide with shock and then anger. "Get your hands off me, you filthy laborer!" Preston shouted, trying to use his free hand to shove Darius away. "Do you know who I am? I am the CFO of Apex Global. I can buy and sell you 10 times over. I will have you arrested for assault." Darius did not let go. Instead, he tightened his grip. I heard a small crunching sound followed by a yelp of pain from Preston. Preston's knees buckled. He tried to swing at Darius, a wild, desperate punch aimed at his jaw. Darius caught the fist in his other hand effortlessly, like he was catching a slow-moving ball. He squeezed again. Preston cried out, dropping to his knees on the stage. "You do not know who anyone is, do you?" Preston, Darius said, looking down at him with cold contempt. "You look, but you do not see. You see a woman in a simple dress and you think she is poor. You see a man in work boots and you think he is weak. You are blind, and blindness is a dangerous trait for a CFO." "Let him go," my mother screamed from the bottom of the steps. "You are hurting him. Someone call the police. That man is a maniac." Darius ignored her. He leaned down, bringing his face close to Preston's. "You wanted to clean house, Preston," he whispered. "You wanted to get rid of the dead weight. Well, congratulations. You are about to get your wish, just not the way you thought." He released Preston's hands, shoving him backward. Preston scrambled away, clutching his bruised wrists, his expensive tuxedo now stained with mud from the stage floor. He looked up at Darius, hate burning in his eyes. "You are dead," he panted. "You hear me? I will make sure you never work in this town again. I will bury you." Darius just smiled, a cold, humorless smile. "You are going to try," he said. "But I think you have a phone call to take first." Preston scrambled backward on the stage, his expensive tuxedo now smeared with mud. He looked like a cornered rat, his eyes darting between Darius and the security guards who were hesitating at the edge of the platform. He opened his mouth to scream another threat to demand that Darius be thrown in jail for assault, but a shrill electronic sound cut him off. It was his phone ringing in his breast pocket. The ringtone was an obnoxious classical fanfare, the kind of sound a man chooses when he wants everyone to know he is important. Preston reached into his jacket with a shaking hand. He pulled out the sleek device and glanced at the screen. His expression shifted instantly from fear to a look of desperate relief. He held the phone up like a shield, a smug grin returning to his bruised face. "You are done now," he spat at Darius. "This is the executive office of Apex Global, my boss, the real power. When I tell them what you just did, you will be lucky to get a job sweeping streets." He swiped the screen to answer and hit the speakerphone button, wanting the entire audience to hear his authority. He wanted them to hear him wielding his new power as CFO. He wanted to crush us with it. Preston straightened his tie, trying to regain some shred of dignity. "This is Preston," he barked into the phone, his voice trembling with adrenaline. "I am in the middle of a situation here. I have been assaulted by a disgruntled laborer. I want legal on the line immediately. We are going to bury this man." There was a pause on the other end of the line. The connection was crystal clear, amplified by the silence of the stunned crowd. A woman's voice, cool and professional, floated out of the tiny speaker. "Mr. Preston, this is Sarah, the executive assistant to the chairman of the board. I am afraid legal cannot help you right now." Preston frowned, confusion clouding his eyes. "What do you mean, Sarah?" "I am the CFO. I give the orders. Get the chairman on the line. I want to speak to him directly. I want this man destroyed. I want his name blacklisted from every construction site in the state. Do you hear me?" The woman on the phone sighed, a sound of infinite patience. "I cannot put the chairman on the line, Mr. Preston," she said. "Why not?" Preston demanded, his voice rising to a shriek. "Is he on the golf course? Is he taking a nap? Tell that old dinosaur to pick up the phone. This is an emergency." "Mr. Preston, you do not understand," Sarah said, her voice icy now. "I cannot put him on the phone because he is not in the office. According to his GPS tracker and the security feed I am currently monitoring, he is at a wedding in the Hamptons. In fact, he is standing right in front of you." The air left the garden. It rushed out in a single collective gasp, leaving a vacuum of pure shock. Preston froze. The phone nearly slipped from his fingers. He looked at the device, then slowly lifted his head. He looked at the empty space around him. He looked at the guests, staring with their mouths open. And then finally his gaze landed on Darius. Darius, who was standing 5 feet away, watching him with a face like carved granite. Darius, who was wearing dirty work boots and a neon vest. Darius, who had just crushed his wrist with one hand. The realization hit Preston like a physical blow. His knees buckled. He shook his head, denial warring with the terrifying truth. "No," he whispered. "No, that is impossible. He is just a laborer. He drives a truck. He is poor." Sarah's voice came through the speaker one last time, sharp as a guillotine blade. "Hand the phone to Chairman Washington, Mr. Preston. He wants to have a word with you about your employment status, and I suggest you listen very carefully." Darius released his grip on Preston's wrist, letting the man stumble backward. Preston clutched his bruised arm, his chest heaving, his eyes darting frantically between the phone in his hand and the man standing before him. The air in the tent was electric, charged with a tension so thick it felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Darius did not reach for the sleek, expensive smartphone Preston was holding. Instead, he reached into the front pocket of his oil-stained jeans. He pulled out a device that looked like it had survived a war zone. It was a rugged, heavy-duty smartphone with a cracked screen and a thick rubber case coated in dried gray cement. The screen was illuminated, showing an active call interface. With a movement that was deliberate and agonizingly slow, Darius pressed his thumb against the red icon on his screen. At that exact second, the call on Preston's speakerphone cut out with a sharp electronic beep. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a guillotine blade hanging suspended in the air, waiting to drop. The connection was undeniable. Sarah had not just been on the line with Preston, she had been on a conference call with Darius the entire time. She had heard everything. "You can put the phone away, Preston," Darius said. His voice had changed. It was no longer the rough, gravelly tone of a tired construction worker. It had smoothed out, becoming cold, precise, and terrifyingly authoritative. It was the voice of a man who commanded armies, the voice of a man who moved billions of dollars with a single word. "I believe Sarah has concluded her portion of the meeting. Now it is my turn." Darius took a step forward, his heavy boots thudding against the wooden stage. He did not look like a laborer anymore. Despite the dirt and the vest, he looked like a king in exile reclaiming his throne. In the span of exactly 60 minutes, you have managed to violate 3 separate critical clauses of your non-disclosure agreement and 2 fundamental canons of our corporate ethics policy. He held up one calloused finger. First, you publicly discussed confidential internal strategy regarding the board of directors and a potential hostile takeover before any vote was cast. You announced plans to oust the chairman to a room full of civilians. That is not just a breach of contract, Preston. That is disseminating insider information. That is a federal crime. He held up a second finger, his eyes boring into Preston's soul. Second, you openly declared an intent to violate federal equal employment opportunity laws by targeting specific demographics for termination based on race and cultural fit. You announced a plan to purge the company of the very diversity that made it strong. My legal team has been listening to the audio feed from my pocket. They have already drafted the termination paperwork for cause. He held up a third finger. And finally, you engaged in conduct unbecoming of an executive officer by physically assaulting the spouse of a majority shareholder. You grabbed my wife, you twisted her arm, and you did it while representing Apex Global. Darius lowered his hand. I built Apex Global on a foundation of integrity. I built it with these hands. He held up his dirt-stained palms for the crowd to see. I started pouring concrete when I was 18 years old. I know every bolt, every beam, and every worker in this company. And you stand here in a rented tuxedo drinking champagne you cannot afford and think you have the right to tear it down. You called me a dinosaur, Preston. You called me a figurehead. Well, you are about to learn a very painful lesson. Fossils are hard. And this dinosaur still has teeth. Preston looked as if he had stopped breathing. His face was no longer red with anger. It was a sickly shade of gray, like wet ash. The name hung in the air between them, heavy and suffocating. Darius Washington, the founder, the legend, the man whose name was on the building Preston worked in, the man whose signature was on the paychecks Preston cashed. It was impossible. It had to be a nightmare. Preston took a stumbling step back, his polished shoes skidding on the wet stage. He looked at the dirty boots again, but this time he did not see poverty. He saw the eccentricities of a genius. He looked at the cement dust on the t-shirt and saw the hands-on leadership style the business journals always raved about. The pieces fell into place with a sickening click. No, Preston whispered, his voice barely audible over the sound of the wind rattling the tent flaps. No, you cannot be him. Darius Washington is a myth. He does not come to weddings in the Hamptons dressed like this. He does not marry her. He gestured weakly toward me, his hand trembling so violently he could barely keep it lifted. Darius took another step forward, invading Preston's personal space with the sheer force of his presence. I am exactly who I say I am, Preston. And I am exactly where I need to be. Standing next to my wife. Protecting my company from a liability like you. You wanted to meet the chairman. You wanted to look him in the eye and tell him he was a dinosaur. Well, here I am. Look at me. Preston could not look. He dropped his gaze, staring at the floor like a scolded child. I did not know, he stammered. Sir, I was just joking. It was a misunderstanding. I have so much respect for your vision. I can fix this. Please. This is my wedding day. Darius did not blink. His expression did not soften. There is nothing to fix, he said. The damage is done. And as for your wedding day, consider this my gift to you. The gift of consequences. You are fired, Preston, effective immediately. You are stripped of your title, your stock options, and your security clearance. You will not set foot in Apex Global headquarters again, not even to collect your personal effects. Security will box them up and leave them on the curb. Preston let out a strangled sob. You cannot do that. I have a contract. You had a contract, Darius corrected. A contract you breached the moment you opened your mouth on this stage. And do not worry about the legalities. My legal team is already drafting the paperwork. In fact, you can expect a process server at your door tomorrow morning. We are filing a civil suit for defamation of corporate leadership and breach of fiduciary duty. We are going to make sure that the only thing you ever manage again is a shift at a fast food drive-thru. And even then, I might just buy the franchise to fire you again." Darius turned his back on Preston, dismissing him as if he were nothing more than a nuisance. He walked over to me, his eyes softening instantly. He reached out and took my hand, his rough palm warm and reassuring. "Are you okay, baby?" he asked, his voice gentle again. I nodded, unable to speak. I was more than okay. I was witnessing justice. Pure, unadulterated justice. The silence didn't last. It broke like a fever. A murmur started in the front row where Preston's so-called VIP guests were seated. These were men and women from the construction and finance sectors, people Preston had invited to show off his new connections. But now they weren't looking at Preston. They were staring at Darius. I saw an older man in a charcoal suit stand up slowly. He squinted through his glasses, ignoring the rain that was drifting under the tent flap. I recognized him. He was the CEO of a concrete supply firm, a man my parents had been fawning over all afternoon. "Oh my God," he whispered loud enough to be heard. "It is him. That is Darius Washington. I saw him at the groundbreaking ceremony for the stadium last year. He hates suits." The whisper turned into a roar. Phones were pulled out. People were frantically Googling, searching for images of the reclusive billionaire chairman. Screens were held up comparing the headshots in business journals to the man standing on the stage in work boots. The resemblance was undeniable. The realization swept through the crowd like a physical force. The laughter that had filled the air 10 minutes ago was replaced by a terrified hush. The guests who had mocked Darius, the women who had sneered at his vest, the men who had jeered at his truck, they all suddenly looked ill. They realized they had just insulted the most powerful man in their industry. The social tide turned so fast it was dizzying. People began to physically distance themselves from Preston and Bianca. They took steps back, creating a wide circle around the stage as if failure was contagious. No one wanted to be standing next to the man who had just been publicly executed by the king. They turned their backs on the bride and groom, orienting themselves toward Darius, their expressions shifting from mockery to a fawning sort of reverence. My parents stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs. They were the only ones who still didn't fully understand the magnitude of what was happening. They were not in the industry. They did not read the trade papers. They just saw their golden ticket turning into ash. My mother, Patricia, looked around wildly, her eyes darting from the guests who were now shunning her to the son-in-law she had worshipped. "Desmond," she hissed, clutching my father's arm. "What is happening? Why are they looking at him like that? Preston said he was a nobody." My father didn't answer. He was staring at Darius with a look of dawning horror. He saw the way the other powerful men in the room were bowing their heads. He saw the fear in Preston's eyes. He realized that the balance of power had shifted, but he couldn't comprehend how. How could the man in the mud be the king? How could the daughter he called a failure be standing next to the throne? They looked small suddenly. The arrogance that had fueled them all day evaporated, leaving them looking like two confused elderly people standing in the rain at a party that had just ended. They looked at me, searching for an explanation, for a lifeline, but I just stared back, my face impassive. They had chosen their side. Now they had to live on it. Bianca let out a scream that sounded like glass shattering. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated denial. She looked at Preston cowering on the floor, and then at Darius standing like a titan. Her brain simply refused to process the information. It rejected the new reality where she was not the princess and I was not the pauper. "No," she shrieked, her face twisting into an ugly mask of rage. "This is a lie. This is all a sick joke. You are lying, Ebony. You hired these people. You put that fake document on the screen. And him." She pointed a shaking finger at Darius. "He is a nobody. He is a bricklayer. I saw his truck. It is a piece of junk." She stomped across the stage, her white dress now trailing in the mud that Preston had tracked up. She looked deranged, her perfect hair coming undone in the wind. "You think you can fool us?" she spat at Darius. "You think because you put on a deep voice and acted tough, we are going to believe you are a billionaire? You are nothing. You are the help. And I am going to prove it. Before anyone could stop her, she lunged at Darius. It was a feral, desperate attack. She grabbed the front of his neon safety vest and ripped it open. The Velcro tore with a loud ripping sound that echoed through the silent tent. She clawed at his gray t-shirt, trying to tear it away as if she expected to find a costume label underneath. She wanted to expose the fraud. She wanted to reveal the cheap undershirt of a poor man. "Get off me," Darius said, his voice calm but firm. He did not strike her. He simply caught her wrist to stop her from scratching him. But in the struggle, as she pulled and clawed, the sleeve of his t-shirt rode up his forearm. And that was when the stage lights caught it. There, strapped to his wrist amidst the cement dust and the grime, was a watch. But it was not a digital sports watch. It was not a cheap knockoff. It was a Patek Philippe Nautilus in rose gold with a chocolate brown dial. I knew exactly how much it cost because I was with him when he bought it to celebrate the closing of the Apex acquisition, $200,000. It gleamed against his dark skin, a beacon of undeniable wealth that cut through the gloom of the storm like a laser. The guests in the front row gasped in unison. These were wealthy people. They knew watches. They knew that you could not fake the specific luster of that gold or the intricate movement of that second hand. They knew that a man who wore the equivalent of a luxury sports car on his wrist was not worried about the price of gas for his pickup truck. Bianca stopped struggling instantly. Her eyes were glued to the watch. She stared at the intricate face, the heavy gold links that were now smeared with a little bit of mud from her own hands. Her breathing hitched in her throat. She looked from the watch up to Darius' face. The arrogance drained out of her, leaving only a hollow terror. The reality crashed down on her with the weight of a collapsing building. It was real. The money was real. The power was real. And she had just spent the last 4 hours treating a man who could buy her entire existence like he was beneath her. She made a small whimpering sound, and her hands fell away from his chest. She stepped back, stumbling over her own train, leaving muddy handprints on Darius' shirt. But the dirt did not make him look poor anymore. It just made him look like a king who had momentarily stepped down into the mud to deal with a peasant. The tension in the tent was already at a breaking point, but the arrival of a breathless man in an immaculate tuxedo pushed it over the edge. It was Mr. Henderson, the general manager of the Hamptons Hideaway. Throughout the planning process, my mother had spoken of him with reverence, treating him like a minor deity because he controlled the reservation schedule. She had bragged about how difficult it was to get a booking here, how she had to pull strings just to get a meeting with him. Now that same man was sprinting across the wet lawn, his coattails flapping behind him, ignoring the puddles splashing onto his polished shoes. He did not run toward the bride. He did not run toward the groom or my parents. He ran straight to me. He skidded to a halt at the foot of the stairs, his face pale and glistening with sweat. He looked terrified. He bowed low, so low, it was almost comical, a gesture of supreme deference that sent a fresh wave of shock through the crowd. "Madam Chairman," he gasped, catching his breath. "I am so incredibly sorry. I was away at the main office dealing with the storm damage. I had no idea you were on the premises. If I had known the owner of the estate was attending, I would have been here to greet you personally." The words hung in the air like smoke. "Owner." My mother, Patricia, made a choking sound. Her eyes bulged. She looked at Mr. Henderson, then at me, shaking her head in a spasm of denial. "What are you saying, Mr. Henderson?" She stammered, her voice shrill and weak. "We rented this venue. We paid the deposit. This is our wedding, Mr." Henderson stood up, straightening his jacket, and turned to look at my mother with a cold professional disdain. "You paid a rental fee for the use of the grounds, madam," he said, his tone clipped and dismissive. "But the grounds themselves, along with the hotel, the golf course, and the private beach, are the property of Onyx Capital. And since Ms. Washington is the sole proprietor of Onyx Capital, that makes this her house. You are merely guests. And from what I can see, extremely rude ones." He turned his back on her, cutting her off completely, and looked back at me. His demeanor shifted instantly back to one of anxious servitude. "Ms. Washington, please forgive the staff. We were under the impression that this was a charity event you had authorized. We did not realize these people would treat the property or you with such disrespect." He glanced around at the overturned chairs, the mud tracked onto the stage, and the spilled food. He looked at Preston cowering on the floor and Bianca shivering in her ruined dress. "Shall I have security clear this mess from your garden, madam?" he asked. His voice was hopeful, as if he wanted nothing more than to sweep my family into the trash where he felt they belonged. "I have the local police on speed dial. We can have the premises vacated in 10 minutes. Just give the word, and I will have them removed for trespassing and disorderly conduct." I looked down at Mr. Henderson. Then I looked at the sea of faces staring up at me. My parents looked small and shriveled, their pretensions stripped away to reveal the fear underneath. Bianca looked like a child who had broken a toy and was waiting to be punished. Preston looked like a man facing a firing squad. They were all waiting for my answer. They were waiting to see if the daughter they had cast out would show them the mercy they had never shown her. I took a deep breath, smelling the rain and the sweet scent of total victory. The power was entirely in my hands. The venue was mine. The debt was mine. Their futures were mine. And Mr. Henderson stood ready like a loyal soldier waiting for the command to execute. I looked at Mr. Henderson, who was waiting with bated breath for my command. Then I turned my gaze slowly to my parents. They were huddled together at the foot of the stairs, shivering not from the cold, but from the terrifying realization of what they had done. "You really thought you pulled this off, didn't you?" I asked, my voice carrying over the sound of the wind. "You thought you managed to secure the most exclusive venue in the state on a wish and a prayer. You did not even question why the invoice was zeroed out. You just assumed the world owed it to you. The truth is, I approved that application. When my team brought me the request from the Washington family, I told them to let you have it. I told them to waive the fee. $50,000, Mom. That is what I gave you today. I did it because despite everything, despite the years of neglect and the constant criticism, I still wanted to be a good sister. I wanted Bianca to have her fairy tale. I wanted to give you one last chance to be a family. I thought that maybe if I gave you this gift anonymously, without asking for credit, you might look at me with kindness just once. I wanted to believe that somewhere under all that greed, there was love." I paused, letting the words sink in. My mother was sobbing now, her hands covering her face. My father looked at the ground, unable to meet my eyes. But I was wrong. I continued, my voice hardening. I was so foolishly wrong. I came here offering an olive branch and you used it to beat me. Bianca threw wine in my face because she could not stand to see me happy. She called me dirt. And you, Dad. I looked at him until he was forced to look up. You walked out into the rain, not to bring me inside, but to throw a dirty rag at me. You told me to wipe my face, so I would not embarrass you. You locked the gate. You literally locked me out of the celebration I paid for. You sat inside eating food that I bought, drinking wine that I provided, and you laughed while I froze. You mocked my husband. You belittled his work. You tried to humiliate the very people who were keeping you afloat. You took my kindness and you spat on it. Well, the rain has stopped washing away my patience. There is no more grace left in me for you. Not a single drop. I turned back to Mr. Henderson, who straightened up, ready to serve. You asked me if I wanted you to remove the mess from my garden, I said, my voice cold and final. The answer is yes. This party is over. Cut the music, turn off the lights, and get these people off my property. I want them gone, Mr. Henderson. All of them, right now. The wedding is cancelled. Preston stood up, his legs shaking violently beneath him. The silence of the room was broken by a sudden aggressive buzzing from his breast pocket. It was not a phone call this time. It was a notification. Then another. Then a cascade of vibrations that felt like electric shocks against his chest. He pulled the phone out, his wet fingers slipping on the screen. He stared at the notifications stacking up on his lock screen, each one a digital hammer blow, destroying his life in real time. Notification from American Express corporate platinum card, ending in 4098, has been deactivated by the system administrator. Transaction declined. Notification from Apex Fleet Management. Vehicle ID 772 has been remotely disabled for asset recovery. GPS location locked. Tow truck dispatched. Notification from Apex Human Resources. Your access to the company server has been revoked. Severance package denied due to gross misconduct. Pending stock options canceled. He tapped the banking app desperately, trying to log in to transfer his funds to a private account. Access denied. User account suspended pending legal review. He tried his email. Account not found. He was being erased. In the span of 2 minutes, Darius had turned off his financial life support. He looked up toward the parking lot where his sleek company car was parked. The headlights flashed once and then went dark, the doors locked audibly. He was stranded. He had no money, he had no car, he had no job, and he was standing in the mud in a ruined tuxedo. Bianca reached out to him, her mascara running down her cheeks in black rivulets. "Preston, baby," she sobbed, clutching at his sleeve. "Do not worry about them. We do not need the job. We have each other. We have the house. We can fix this. We can sue them. Just calm down and look at me." He slapped her hand away. The sound was sharp and shocking, echoing through the quiet tent. He looked at her with eyes full of pure, unadulterated hatred. There was no love there. There never really had been. Just calculation. And now the math did not add up. "Fix this!" he screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Fix this! You stupid, deluded little girl! There is nothing to fix. It is gone. Everything is gone. My job, my stock, my reputation. My car is bricked in the parking lot, Bianca. I cannot even drive out of here. And do you know why? Because of you." He pointed a trembling finger at her, and then at my parents, who were cowering nearby like frightened children. "Because of your lying, bankrupt trash family. You told me you came from old money. You told me you had connections. You lied. You are nothing but frauds living on credit and borrowed time. You dragged me into your sewer. I was a rising star. I was going to be the CEO. And now I am nothing because I stood next to you. But Preston..." Bianca wailed, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the rain. "I love you. We are married. This is our wedding day." "No, we are not," Preston spat. He fumbled with the ring on his finger, tearing it off his hand. He threw it into the mud with a violent splash. "I am not marrying into a family of beggars and liars. I am not going down with your sinking ship. The license is not signed yet. As far as I am concerned, this never happened. You want a husband, ask the bricklayer. Maybe he is hiring." He turned and started running. He did not run like a dignified executive. He ran like a coward. He shoved past a waiter, knocking a tray of empty glasses to the ground. He pushed past the guests who were parting like the Red Sea to let the contagion pass. He ran out of the tent and into the pouring rain, heading toward the main road, presumably to call a taxi because his company Porsche was now just a 2-ton paperweight. I watched him go. I felt no satisfaction, only a cold confirmation. I knew he never loved her. I knew he was a parasite looking for a host. And the moment the host was revealed to be sick, he detached himself. Bianca stood there alone in the center of the dance floor. The white dress she had prized so much, now splashed with mud. Her groom gone, her future evaporated. She looked at the ring in the dirt. She looked at the empty space where Preston had been. And finally, she collapsed. Bianca did not just let him go. She could not. To let Preston walk away was to admit that her life was over. It was to admit that the fantasy she had constructed since childhood had crumbled into dust. She hitched up her heavy, sodden skirt and ran after him, her heels sinking into the soft earth with every frantic step. She looked like a ghost fleeing a burning castle, desperate and unhinged. "Preston, wait!" she screamed, her voice tearing at her throat. "You cannot leave me. Please come back. We can talk about this. She caught up to him near the edge of the service road, right where the pavement met the muddy garden path. It was the exact spot where I had stood earlier, shivering under the umbrella. She reached out and grabbed the sleeve of his jacket, her fingers digging into the wet fabric. "Preston, stop!" she begged, pulling at him. "Do not do this. I love you." Preston spun around. His face was not the face of a man looking at his bride. It was the face of a man looking at a parasite. The disgust in his eyes was absolute. "Get off me!" he snarled. He did not just pull his arm away, he shoved her. It was a violent, impulsive push born of frustration and malice. He put his hands on her shoulders and threw her backward with all his strength. Bianca let out a short, sharp gasp as she lost her footing. Her high heels slipped on the wet grass. She flailed her arms, trying to find purchase in the air, but there was nothing to hold on to. She flew backward, landing with a wet, sickening thud right in the center of a large mud puddle. The impact sent a spray of brown water flying into the air, coating her face and hair. The cold slime seeped instantly through the delicate layers of imported silk, ruining the dress that had cost more than my first car. She sat there, stunned for a moment, the breath knocked out of her. She looked down at herself. The pristine white bodice was now streaked with gray sludge. Her veil was dragging in the dirt, a tangled mess of lace and mud. She brought her hands up to her face, and they came away covered in filth. She looked exactly like the thing she had despised. She looked like a drowned rat. She looked like dirt. The irony was so heavy, it felt like a physical weight pressing her down into the earth. Just hours ago, she had stood inside the warm, dry tent, holding a glass of wine, and laughing as I stood in this exact spot. She had mocked my appearance. She had called me a mess. She had told me I was ruining the aesthetic. Now the universe had flipped the script with terrifying precision. She was the one sitting in the rain. She was the one covered in mud. She was the one who was alone. Preston did not even look back. He straightened his jacket, turned his collar up against the wind, and marched down the road, disappearing into the darkness, without a single glance at the woman he was supposed to spend his life with. Bianca watched him go, her lip trembling uncontrollably. Then the reality finally broke her. She did not cry prettily. She did not weep a single tear like a movie star. She howled. It was a guttural, ugly sound of pure despair that rose up from her chest and echoed through the garden. She slammed her fists into the mud, splashing dirty water all over herself again and again, screaming at the empty road, screaming at her parents, screaming at the unfairness of it all. She was a queen dethroned, a bride abandoned, sitting in the filth of her own making, waiting for a savior who was never coming back. I watched my sister screaming in the mud, a portrait of absolute misery. Any normal parent would have rushed to her side. Any loving mother would have been down in the dirt holding her child regardless of the ruined clothes. But my parents were not normal. And they certainly were not loving. They were survivors. Parasites who had just realized their host body was dead and were frantically looking for a new one to latch onto. They watched Preston disappear down the road. They saw the ruin of their financial plan, and then in perfect synchronization their heads turned toward me. I saw the calculation happen in real time. I saw the panic recede and be replaced by a terrifying mask of affection. They did not run to Bianca. They stepped right past her. My mother actually lifted the hem of her gown to avoid brushing against my sister's muddy arm as she lay there weeping. They marched toward me, their faces transforming from shock to a beaming, teary-eyed pride that made my stomach turn. "Oh, Ebony," my mother cried out, throwing her arms open as if she wanted to embrace me. "My darling girl, thank goodness. Thank goodness you are here." She stopped just short of hugging me, seeing the look of ice on my face, but she did not let that deter her. She clasped her hands over her heart and looked at me with wide, glistening eyes. "You did it. You actually did it. Do you not see, Desmond? Our plan worked." My father nodded vigorously, wiping sweat from his forehead and forcing a jovial smile. "It certainly did, Patricia. It worked better than we could have ever imagined. He looked at me, his chest puffing out with false importance. Ebony, surely you understand what just happened here. You are a smart girl. You run a massive company. You must have realized that this was all for you. I stared at them, unable to comprehend the sheer depth of their delusion. What are you talking about? I asked, my voice flat. The treatment, my mother said, stepping closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. The rain. The insults. The way we favored Bianca. Oh, honey, do you really think we are that cruel? We are your parents. We love you more than life itself. But we saw the potential in you, Ebony. We saw that you were special. You were a diamond in the rough. And what does a diamond need to shine? It needs pressure. Massive, crushing pressure. That is right, my father chimed in. We knew that if we made things easy for you, you would never reach your full potential. We had to be the villains so you could be the hero. We had to push you away so you would go out and build your empire. If we had been soft, you would just be a doctor like we wanted. But because we were hard on you, look at what you became. A billionaire. You own the estate. You own the debt. You are the savior of this family. My mother reached out and tried to touch my arm, her fingers trembling. We did this for you, she sobbed. It was a test, Ebony. A test of your character. And you passed with flying colors. We are so incredibly proud of you. And now that you have proven yourself, we can finally be a real family again. We can put all this ugliness behind us. After all, we are the Washingtons. We stick together. She looked at Darius, acknowledging him for the first time with a sickeningly sweet smile. And Darius. Welcome to the family, son. I always knew there was something special about you too. I told Desmond just last week that you had the look of a leader. We were just testing you too, just making sure you were strong enough to protect our little girl. They stood there beaming at me, waiting for me to break down and thank them. They truly believed that they could rewrite history in 10 seconds. They thought that because I had money, I would buy their lies. They thought that the bond of blood was strong enough to strangle the truth. They looked at me with hungry eyes, not seeing a daughter but seeing a bank account that had just opened its doors. They were waiting for the hug. They were waiting for the forgiveness. They were waiting for me to invite them into the mansion they had just gifted away. I stared at my parents for a long moment, letting the silence stretch until it was almost painful. My mother's smile began to falter at the edges, trembling under the weight of my gaze. My father shifted his weight nervously, wiping his sweaty palms on his trousers. They were waiting for me to accept their rewrite of history. They wanted me to nod and say thank you for the abuse because it made me rich. It was the most insulting thing they had ever said to me, and considering they had just disowned me 20 minutes ago, that was saying a lot. A test, I repeated slowly, my voice dead calm. You think you can call 29 years of neglect a test? You think starving me of affection was a strategy? You think locking me out in the storm like a stray dog was a lesson in character building? That is not parenting, that is cruelty, and it is cowardice. I took a step closer to them and they instinctively stepped back, shrinking away from the truth. You did not push me to succeed because you loved me, I continued. You pushed me away because you were ashamed of me. You wanted a doctor to brag about at the country club so you could feel important. You did not care about my happiness or my dreams or my heart. You only cared about your own image. And now that I have surpassed your wildest expectations, you think you can claim credit for my hard work. You think you can retrofit your hatred into tough love just to get access to my bank account. I shook my head, looking at them with a profound sense of disappointment. I realized in that moment that I did not hate them anymore. The hate had evaporated, leaving only pity. They were hollow shell-like people who would say anything to survive. Let us be very clear about the results of your little experiment, I said, my voice rising just enough to be heard by every guest remaining in the garden. You tested me, yes. You tested my patience. You tested my sanity. You tested my ability to survive without the people who were supposed to protect me. But here is the final grade. You failed. You failed as parents. You failed as human beings, and you have lost the privilege of calling me your daughter." My mother let out a strangled gasp, reaching for my hand again, her eyes wide with terror. "Ebony, please," she begged, desperation creeping into her voice. "Do not be like this. We are your family. We are all you have." "No," I said, pulling my hand away sharply as if she had burned me. "I have a husband who would walk through fire for me. I have a career I built with my own two hands. You are just people who used to know me." I turned away from them, breaking the connection forever. I looked at Mr. Henderson, who was standing at attention with two large security guards flanking him. "Mr. Henderson," I said, pointing at my parents, and then at Bianca, who was still sobbing in the mud. "Please escort these trespassers off my property." Mr. Henderson nodded sharply, a look of grim satisfaction on his face. "With pleasure, Madam Chairman." I checked my watch, looking at the time with deliberate indifference. "You have 10 minutes," I said over my shoulder, not looking back at them. 10 minutes to gather your personal belongings and vacate the premises. If you are still here at minute 11, I will have you arrested for criminal trespassing, and knowing the local police chief as well as I do, I doubt he will be inclined to go easy on you." "But where will we go?" my father cried out, his voice cracking with panic. "We have nowhere to go. The house is gone. The car is gone. We have no money." "I do not know, Dad," I said, walking back toward the warmth of my husband. "Maybe you should treat it as a test. I am sure it will build character." The low thrumming sound began as a vibration in the ground before it exploded into a roar overhead. The wind from the rotor blades whipped through the garden, flattening the grass and sending a spray of mist over the stunned guests. A sleek black helicopter descended from the gray clouds. On its side, emblazoned in matte gold, was the logo that had haunted my parents for the last hour. Onyx Capital. It touched down on the far side of the lawn, the landing gear sinking slightly into the soft earth. It was a machine of war and luxury, a predator in the sky that had come to collect its queen. Darius put his hand on the small of my back. It was a warm, steady weight that anchored me. He did not say a word. He just guided me toward the aircraft. We walked past the ruined wedding cake. We walked past the overturned tables. We walked past the people who had called us dirt. We did not hurry. We moved with the easy confidence of people who own the ground they walk on. The wind from the blades buffeted my parents, blowing my mother's expensive hairdo into a tangled mess and forcing my father to shield his eyes. They looked huddled and small, standing there in the wind, like wet scarecrows stripped of their stuffing. As we neared the helicopter, the pilot opened the passenger door. The interior was lined with cream leather and warm amber lighting. It looked like a sanctuary. I paused for 1 second, just one heartbeat, to look back. My mother Patricia took a step forward. Her hand reached out in a pathetic, grasping gesture. Her mouth moved, shaping my name, but the sound was swallowed by the engine roar. She looked terrified. She looked like a woman realizing that night was falling, and she had nowhere to sleep. Beside her, Bianca was still sitting in the mud, hugging her knees and rocking back and forth, staring at nothing. And my father was frantically tapping on his phone, likely discovering that his service had been cut off just like Preston's. They were stranded. Preston had taken the only car that could leave. The other guests were already fleeing in their own vehicles, desperate to escape the blast zone of our social explosion. My family had no car. They had no home to go back to. They had no money for a taxi. And they were standing in the middle of a storm, on an estate that was about to be locked down by security. Darius helped me up into the cabin. He climbed in after me, and the door slid shut with a heavy, solid thud that sealed out the noise and the cold. The sudden silence was blissful. I leaned back into the soft leather seat, and Darius took my hand, bringing it to his lips. "Are you ready to go home, Mrs. Washington?" he asked. I looked out the window as the helicopter began to lift. I saw the figures of my parents and my sister growing smaller and smaller. They looked like tiny insects trapped in a jar. I felt a weight lift off my chest, a burden I had carried for 29 years. I did not feel sad, I felt free. Yes, I said, squeezing his hand. Let us go home. The helicopter banked sharply, turning toward the city, and we vanished into the clouds, leaving the mud and the misery far behind us. The morning sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse apartment, casting a warm golden glow over the living room. It was a stark contrast to the gray rain of that terrible day 1 year ago. On the marble coffee table lay the latest issue of Forbes magazine. The cover image was striking. It showed Darius and me standing side by side, looking powerful and unshakable. He was wearing a sharp navy suit, and I was in a structured crimson dress. The bold white headline read, "The New Face of Ethical Wealth." Inside, the article detailed the unprecedented growth of Onyx Capital and the revolutionary construction methods Apex Global had implemented under Darius' fully reinstated leadership. We were not just rich, we were respected. We were changing the industry, proving that you could build an empire without losing your soul. But the magazine was just paper. It was a symbol of our professional victory, but it paled in comparison to the personal triumph sleeping in the next room. I walked softly down the hallway, the plush carpet absorbing the sound of my footsteps. I pushed open the door to the nursery. The room was painted a soft, calming sage green, filled with the scent of lavender and fresh linen. In the center of the room lay a custom walnut crib. I leaned over the railing, my heart swelling with a love so fierce it almost brought me to knees. Sleeping soundly on his back was our son Atlas. We named him Atlas because from the moment he arrived, he became the center of our world. He had Darius' eyes and my nose. He let out a soft sigh in his sleep, his tiny hand curling around the edge of his blanket. I reached down and brushed a finger against his velvet soft cheek. I made a promise to him every single day. You will never know conditional love. You will never have to earn your place in this family. You will never be locked out in the cold. You are our priority, simply because you exist. Darius appeared in the doorway, his presence warm and grounding. He walked over and wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder as we both looked down at our son. "He is perfect," Darius whispered. "He is everything I said," leaning back into him. "Are you ready for the ceremony?" he asked, kissing my temple. I nodded. Today was not just about business. It was about healing. In an hour, we would be cutting the ribbon on the Onyx Haven. It was a massive state-of-the-art facility we had built in the heart of the city. It was not just a shelter. It was a comprehensive support center for the homeless, providing luxury-style transitional housing, job training, mental health services, and legal aid. It was the ultimate answer to my parents' legacy. They had mocked the poor. They had looked down on those who struggled. They had tried to shame us for being close to the ground. So we decided to use our billions to lift people up from that very ground. We built a place where dignity was the currency, where no one was treated like dirt. I adjusted my jacket, feeling the strength returning to my body after the birth. We were building a new legacy, one brick at a time. A legacy where success was measured by how many people you helped, not how many you hurt. I looked at the magazine on the table one last time, then back at my husband and son. The storm was finally over, the sun was out, and we had so much work left to do. The fluorescent lights of the roadside diner hummed with an irritating buzz that seemed to drill directly into Bianca's skull. It was a Tuesday night, but the place was packed with truck drivers and weary travelers looking for a cheap meal. The air smelled of burnt coffee and stale frying oil, a scent that had permanently seeped into Bianca's pores. She adjusted her apron, which was already stained with mustard and grease. Her feet throbbed in the cheap orthopedic shoes she was forced to wear. She had been on her feet for 10 hours straight. There was no manicure today. Her nails were short and chipped, her hands red and chapped from the industrial dish soap. She hurried toward table 4, balancing a tray of burgers and sodas. Her arms shook slightly from exhaustion. As she lowered the tray, a heavy man in a trucker hat shifted unexpectedly, knocking his elbow against her arm. The tray tipped. An entire glass of ice-cold cola cascaded onto the table and splashed onto the man's lap. The reaction was instant and brutal. "You stupid girl!" the man roared, jumping up and shoving the table back. "Watch where you are going! Look at this! You ruined my pants!" Bianca flinched instinctively, raising her hands to protect her face, a reflex born from the last hard year of survival. "I am so sorry, sir," she stammered, her voice trembling. "It was an accident. I will get some towels." The man did not care about apologies. He leaned in, his face red with anger. "You are useless," he spat, "totally incompetent. I do not know why they hire people like you. You should be fired." The words hit her like a physical slap. They were the exact same words she had used on the catering staff at her wedding. They were the words she had used to belittle Darius. The universe was not just punishing her, it was mocking her. She scrambled to wipe up the mess, her knees hitting the sticky linoleum floor. She was the one on her knees now, cleaning up someone else's mess while being called dirt. In the corner booth of the diner, two elderly figures sat huddled together over a single plate of cold French fries. Desmond and Patricia looked like ghosts of their former selves. Desmond's suit, the only one he had left, was shiny with age and fraying at the cuffs. Patricia's hair, once dyed and coiffed to perfection, was now gray and pulled back in a severe, messy bun. She was counting out coins onto the formica table. 1 quarter, 2 dimes, 5 pennies. She pushed them around, trying to make them add up to enough for a second cup of coffee, but the math never worked. They were silent. They had run out of things to say to each other months ago. There were no more grand plans, no more schemes, just the grinding reality of living in a small rented room above a laundromat, trying to stretch a pension that barely covered the rent. Suddenly, the volume on the small television mounted in the corner of the dining room increased. The nightly news jingle played, cutting through the clatter of silverware. "Breaking news," the anchor announced cheerfully. "Local billionaire and philanthropist Ebony Washington has just announced a record-breaking donation to the city." The name froze the air in the booth. Desmond's hand stopped halfway to his mouth, holding a French fry. Patricia slowly lifted her head, her eyes locking onto the screen. There she was. Ebony. She looked radiant. She was wearing a white suit that cost more than this entire diner. She was standing at a podium, a confident smile on her face. Beside her stood Darius, looking strong and protective, holding a sleeping baby in his arms. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Onyx Capital CEO opens new wing at Children's Hospital." Patricia watched as the camera zoomed in on Ebony's face. It was a face full of peace, full of purpose. It was the face of a woman who was loved. The reporter continued, his voice full of admiration. "Mrs. Washington credits her success to the support of her husband and the values of hard work and integrity. She has truly become a pillar of this community." Desmond dropped the French fry. It hit the table with a soft thud. He looked at his wife. His eyes were watery red, rimmed with fatigue and a deep, aching sorrow. "We had her, Patricia," he whispered, his voice cracking. "She was ours. She was right there in our house. We could have been standing next to her. We could have been holding that grandchild." Patricia did not answer. She could not. Her throat was constricted by a lump of regret so large it threatened to choke her. She remembered the rain. She remembered the rag Desmond had thrown. She remembered giving the key to Bianca. They had bet everything on the wrong child. They had thrown away a diamond to keep a stone. And now the stone was wiping tables and the diamond was out of reach forever. Bianca had stopped wiping the table. She was standing frozen, looking up at the screen. She saw the sister she had tormented. She saw the life she had felt entitled to. She saw the happiness she would never know. A tear leaked out of her eye, mixing with the cola sticky on her cheek. "Hey!" the manager shouted from the kitchen window. Stop daydreaming and clean up that mess, or you are out of here. I have 10 girls waiting for this job. Move it. Bianca jerked back to reality. She looked at the screen one last time just as the image faded to a commercial for luxury cars. She looked at her parents huddled in the corner counting pennies. She looked at the dirty rag in her hand. "Yes, sir," she whispered. She bent down and kept scrubbing at a stain that would never come out. The screen went dark, leaving them in the dim yellow light of the diner alone with the choices they had made. The story of Ebony and Darius teaches us a profound lesson about the danger of arrogance and the power of humility. We live in a world that often judges value by surface appearances, mistaking expensive clothes for character and labor for poverty. Bianca and her parents were so blinded by their obsession with status that they could not see the royalty standing right in front of them in muddy boots. They treated people with cruelty because they thought there would be no consequences, but they learned the hard way that the tables can turn in an instant. True worth is not found in a bank account or a designer dress, but in integrity, hard work, and how you treat those who can do nothing for you. Ebony proved that you can be cast out and still build a kingdom, while her family proved that you can have everything and lose it all through a lack of gratitude. Always be kind for the person you look down on. Today might be the one you need tomorrow. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please subscribe to our channel for more inspiring tales.